Okay, so we've all felt it probably. That simmering tension, right? Or maybe the big silence or even, full-blown arguments when politics comes up at a family gathering.
Oh, absolutely. It happened.
But what about when those political views, those really deeply held beliefs, don't just make things awkward, but actually threaten to break the family apart? How do these really personal beliefs end up sometimes just, shattering the connections we have with the people closest to us?
Yeah, that's the really powerful and honestly often heartbreaking thing we're digging into today. Our main source material for this deep dive is this really compelling YouTube video. It analyzes an interview, and we should probably use air quotes there,
What?
between a 24-year-old woman and her 82-year-old grandfather. It's incredibly raw to watch.
Mm-hmm.
And even though it's just one family's story, it really holds up a mirror to these, bigger societal trends. It gives us a way to pull out some pretty significant insights into these generational ideological clash.
Okay, so our mission today is, it's pretty clear. We want to unpack the layers of what's going on in this specific dynamic, try to spot the patterns, maybe some surprising ones, and really understand what's driving these super intense conflicts. We're going to pull out the key facts from the source and talk about the wider implications, the stuff that goes way beyond just this one family. So let's introduce the main players here. We have Raven, she's 24, and she identifies publicly as disabled, queer, communist, polyamorous, and unemployed. Quite a list.
It is.
And then there's her grandfather, Frank. He's 82, a lifelong Republican voter. And the whole setup for this is an interview Raven set up after they hadn't spoken for a whole year.
Yeah, a full year of no contact. You can just feel the tension.
Totally.
And what jumps out almost immediately are Raven's core arguments, her accusations against Frank. She basically says his vote, him just voting, votes away her basic human right.
Wow.
Yeah, that it enables fascism.
Mm-hmm.
And because of his politics, any claim he might have to unconditional love for her is just, negated. Gone.
So no room for nuance there.
Not from her perspective in that moment, no. She states very clearly she cannot have a relationship with him unless there's absolutely any change in his behavior, meaning his political views and actions.
One thing the source points out right away, and it's striking, is how often these really intense claims, like Raven saying her rights are being voted away or he's enabling fascism, how often they lack specifics.
Exactly.
Like what specific rights?
Yeah.
How exactly is he enabling fascism by casting a vote? The source suggests this lack of detail is kind of a pattern. So what does the source think is really behind these incredibly strong claims if maybe it's not always tied to concrete examples?
Well, that's a really critical observation the source makes. It notes that for, nearly a decade now, there's been this strong push, particularly from what the source identifies as leftists, to actually destroy family relationships over political differences.
Destroy them. That sounds intense.
It is. And the source frames it not just as, an individual maybe getting upset, but as an attempt to, and this is a quote, narcissistically pit everyone against each other by forcing them to pick sides right within the family.
Wow. Forcing sides.
Yeah. So this wider trend makes you question the intent behind that kind of pressure.
And the source apparently identifies some common tactics, some specific language used in these situations.
It does. Things like emotional blackmail comes up, often, according to the source, taking innocent bystanders, maybe like kids, with them when they cut ties over politics.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also this pattern of repeating certain very loaded phrases like calling people Nazi or constantly saying, you're taking my rights away. The source suggests these phrases are almost used like weapons, to shut down any real conversation.
Like conversation enders?
Exactly. And a key point here is how this kind of behavior seems to get socially validated, maybe even encouraged by some media outlets. The source gives examples. The Guardian, BuzzFeed, even MSNBC featured a Yale psychiatrist apparently telling people it was completely fine to cut off family members who voted for certain politicians, especially Trump.
Really? Presented as fun.
Yeah. The concerning thing is that it's framed as being mentally healthy to do this, which, normalizes a really divisive way of handling family disagreements.
Okay, let's dig into Raven's specific ideology a bit more, her self-identity, because that seems central to her demands, her anti-capitalism.
Right.
She believes, according to the source, that the American empire was built off black and indigenous slavery and genocide, and that capitalism itself is just a cycle of exploitation. You're either the exploiter or the exploited.
Yeah, that's her stated view. And the source dives into that, offering some pretty strong counterarguments. On slavery, for instance, it makes the point that, okay, yes, slavery existed and was horrific, but it also points out that many places still have forms of slavery today, and they're not successful first world countries. It even brings up works like the Gulag Archipelago, suggesting that historically, slave labor, like in the Soviet gulags, was often more expensive than free market labor because of things like sabotage and inefficiency.
Interesting point.
The source argues America's success isn't because of slavery, but maybe despite it, attributing it more to things like institutional limitations on abuser. Think the Bill of Rights, separation of powers, and protections against corrupt power, kind of like the ideas in the book Why Nations Fail.
Okay.
And there's a real irony the source highlights. Raven, identifying as a communist, is accusing her grandfather, who participates in a capitalist system, of exploitation. But then the source points to historical examples like, say, 1900s Russia under communism, which it notes enslaved and mass murdered their own population.
Right, the historical track record.
Exactly. The point isn't just the history, but how sometimes, an ideology can maybe blind someone to the exploitation happening within systems they might favor.
Okay, so beyond the big ideology, what about her personal situation? She claims she's too disabled to work, citing 15 plus diagnosed mental and physical disabilities.
Right. That's a major claim. But then the video itself, the source material, apparently shows visual evidence that seems, well, inconsistent with being completely unable to work or function physically.
Like what?
Like showing her using a screwdriver, helping move a washing machine, painting, even picking up her fiancé and twirling them around, dancing. The source also mentions that her disability claims were reportedly denied by the government and that Raven herself hasn't actually provided specific diagnoses for these 15-plus conditions.
So some questions there. And what about the anti-capitalist lifestyle she claims? No job, no bank account, no phone service, no overconsumption. That sounds, pretty extreme.
It does sound extreme. But again, the source points out contradictions. Like, well, how do you film and upload YouTube videos without phone or internet service?
Good question.
It also notes she wears, apparently, a ton of makeup, arguing that's not exactly a basic necessity and can be expensive. And then there's her Barbie collection mentioned as an example of needless consumption, which seems to clash with the no overconsumption.
Right. Barbies aren't exactly bread and water.
Not usually, no. The source concludes that she seems to live with her fiancé's mother and that her partner pays for essentially everything. This leads the source to draw a comparison, perhaps provocatively, to historical figures like Karl Marx, who, advocated against capitalism while relying on others, like Engels, for financial support.
Okay, so let's circle back to that interview. The source doesn't paint it as a conversation at all, does it? Calls it a tribunal.
Yeah, pretty much. The description is that she was there mainly to judge and chastise Grandpa for voting the wrong way. Definitely not a two-way street aimed at understanding. And this dynamic, it really reflects her demands for the relationship. They're absolute. Frank must, in her view, unwire years of propaganda, meaning change his lifelong political. And this change must reflect his unconditional love for her.
Wow, that's a high bar for love.
It is. And she even tells him, I will always be the child in this situation, and you will always be the adult, implying he bears all the responsibility. And she suggests that if he doesn't face consequences for his vote, like her cutting him off, it would basically be enabling fascism.
So his vote equals fascism, and loving her means changing his.
That's the core logic presented. It's a framework where she sets all the terms, demanding total ideological alignment as proof of love.